Hey guys, today I'll be reading Why Me by michibear. This is a one-shot, also make sure to check the description for further information. Hitoshi stepped out the portal and into the USJ. His face was blank, a look he had mastered over the years in order to survive, but he was currently well hidden behind a well-fitting black cat mask. He didn't want to be here, but of course he didn't have a choice. He took a deep breath as he surveyed the enemy, his tired eyes searching for his target. Over the last 5 years, Hitoshi had been forced to train day in and day out, which included training his body physically, hand-to-hand combat, and his quirk. He doesn't think this crazy hair-brain scheme will work, but it wasn't like he had anywhere else to go. His parents were dead, and the foster system was corrupt. He still remembers watching his caseworker count the money as he was dragged away, kicking and screaming. Hell, even if he did have a place or person to go to, he wouldn't be able to escape. Hitoshi learned real quick that he was sold for his quirk, and that he better walk the line carefully. If he didn't, let's just say it wasn't pretty. They never threatened his life, though, because they were in dire need of his quirk. He never understood why or how his quirk was going to be that useful to anyone until a few months ago he was finally let in on the plan that had apparently been in motion for years, with many other plans before this one. When the plan was explained, Hitoshi had almost let his emotions slip in front of his captors. There was no way on this earth that he would be able to take down All Might. Maybe hold on to his conscience long enough for someone else to subdue him? But that would be it. Alas, he had to try and complete the job. Hitoshi frowned. He didn't see his target anywhere. All Might was confirmed to be here today. So where was he? No one was on the floor with the portal yet. The space hero was on top of the stairs, with the students who looked relatively scared, and Hitoshi didn't blame them. Someone was descending down the stairs, a black hero wearing a black jumpsuit, with a white cloth bundled around his neck. Hitoshi felt a lump form in his throat. He knew this hero. It was a Razorhead who just so happened to be Hitoshi's favourite hero. And not just because he saved him from the house fire that killed his parents when he was 5. Razorhead's quirk was considered villainous, but he was able to rise above the odds and became a hero. He even teaches at UA, obviously. Plus, he fights mostly quirkless. Most popular heroes can't fight well without their quirks. Hand-to-hand combat isn't something you see heroes use on the big screens. When Hitoshi learnt that Razorhead was going to be here, he considered reaching out for help somehow, but he quickly diminished the idea. Why would a Razorhead help him? He's a villain now, even if he wanted to be a hero. He also didn't like the thought of a Razorhead remembering him and being disappointed at how he ended up here. He's had enough disappointments in his life. Hitoshi stood there while Shigaraki went on his rants. He hated listening to Shigaraki, but at least right now, the more the man talked, the less he would have to do. Eventually the talking did end, and the goons that Shigaraki hired took over. The goons were all over USD in different zones, as well as fighting a Razorhead in the centre area. Nothing was asked of him. He assumed he was being saved for when and if All Might showed up. He stood on the sidelines with Shigaraki. If it were under better circumstances, he would have enjoyed watching his favourite hero beat the villains. To be useful, and out of curiosity, Hitoshi used his time to study Eraserhead's fighting. The pro hero was better at fighting than he had imagined, though deep down he didn't seem surprised by that. The hero paced himself well and found ways around his quirks he couldn't erase. Over time, even with pacing, Hitoshi noticed the man was slowing down, bit by bit, and his breathing was affected too. The time his hair spent floating was decreasing. Hitoshi was not going to say a word about his observations though, and hoped Shigaraki wouldn't notice. He was silently cheering for Eraserhead. Wouldn't it be such a dream if Eraserhead was able to beat off the attack and save Hitoshi? He was honestly relieved when Shigaraki seemed ready to call for the order of retreat, with only a small amount of resistance from Kurogiri. Of course the retreat had to be interrupted. There were 2 students on the edge of the water nearby. Shigaraki took notice. One had green hair, big green eyes, while the other had dark green hair and features similar to a frog. Shigaraki went to greet the students. After some back and forth, he reached out to touch the frog girl's face. Hitoshi's eyes went wide with fear. He knew what would happen if the girl was touched. He didn't want an innocent student to be hurt, or worse, dead. He broke the rule of only doing what he was told. His heel lifted off the ground before he could think of his actions. The actions grew further. He was working on closing the distance, but he wasn't going to be fast enough. Nothing happened though, as Shigaraki touched the girl's face. Hitoshi glanced around and he saw Eraserhead staring in the direction of his students and Shigaraki. He was panting, goggles hanging off one ear, blood dripping down his arm. Behind him on the ground were the last of the thugs in the area. "Do not touch my students," Eraserhead growled, his red glowing eyes were intimidating, but they faded once Shigaraki's hands were away from his student. Hitoshi could see a smile starting to form on Shigaraki's face. "Man, Eraser, you're so cool, risking life and limb for your precious students, and being able to rescue these 2, with seconds to spare. So cool." He raised his hands in the air. "But you've let yourself get worn down, fighting so many yourself." His smile turned into a smirk. "Puppet, take care of him." Damn, that was his cue. Also, let it be known that he hates the nickname. Shigaraki gave him a side glance as he walked to get to Kurogiri. "And we will be discussing that act of insubordination later." Hitoshi grimaced. Nothing got past Shigaraki. He was thankful for the mask that hid his facial expression, or it would be worse. Hitoshi took a deep breath, stepping towards Eraserhead. He felt the man's eyes on him before he could even look at his face. The pro wasn't using his quirk yet. Eraserhead didn't know his quirk, and was probably trying to conserve energy to fight as efficiently as possible. Hitoshi wasn't sure how to start this fight. He might have been training the last 5 years. Did it mean he was going to outdo a pro? He was still a teenager, for God's sake. So he was going to rely on the only thing that had going for him. Why, he was cut off by Eraserhead's cloth. It wrapped around his wrist, then yanked him forward. He knocked him off balance, because he hadn't been ready for it. Hitoshi recovered just as Eraserhead closed in. The man was probably trying to finish this fight quickly, because it would be harder if it was drawn out. He just had to outlast Eraserhead. No problem, not at all impossible order or anything. Hitoshi dodged, stumbling backwards. Even in his worn-down state, this pro was still so fast. Who in their right mind came up with and improved this plan? Who thought Hitoshi could do this? If he couldn't even keep up with Eraserhead, what were his odds against All Might? Let's be reasonable about this, Hitoshi said, not knowing what else to say. This brought a frustrated chuckle from the pro. Reasonable? Eraserhead said, as he threw out his cloth again. I think we are past reasoning. Hitoshi barely evaded the cloth. Maybe you've been talking to the wrong person, he said calmly. Dusty over here isn't exactly known for his talking skills. He knew he'd pay for the nickname later, but maybe he'd be forgiven if he completed the mission. I don't think anyone here will be reasonable, or otherwise they wouldn't be here, answered, sending the cloth out once again. But this time when Hitoshi avoided it, he grabbed onto it, pulled as hard as he could. His plan was to catch Eraserhead by surprise, because who would expect him to grab it? Apparently, Eraser would. It was barely noticeable that he moved even a little, which isn't too surprising that the man was probably stronger and heavier than Hitoshi. Do you think I want to be here? Hitoshi asked coldly. Not that Eraser would know of the situation, but some reason it struck a nerve. The pro must have noticed the change in tone. But Eraser replied, well, The pro's body went slack and his face looked blank. He looked like he had 1,000 yards stare. Well, that was easier than I thought, Hitoshi mumbled to himself, but that was all he managed to say before a pounding headache started. He held onto his hand as he struggled for control. He could hold 2 to 3 people at once, but so far they'd been willing participants from the league. It was a lot easier to control someone willing. Since beginning his training, he'd only ever controlled one unwilling person at a time. None of them were a pro hero. Hitoshi staggered forward. As he pushed through his headache, he had to keep going. The longer he kept his grip, the easier it became, but only ever so slightly. There was a consistent pounding pressure. He stopped in front of Eraser. Where is All Might? He demanded. He felt better about this part of the mission. They had made him work on what he could command people to do, especially making people answer questions. There was a pause, as if Eraserhead was fighting not to answer. He's resting at the school. Hitoshi glanced at Shigaraki. He was unsure what to ask next, or what to do with the information that was provided. He didn't have to wait long, though. There was a loud explosion on top of the stairs. Lots of dust obscured the view of what happened, but seconds later a voice rang out. I am here! All Might walked up to the dusty area, before jumping on top of the stairs to the centre of the USJ. Hitoshi felt his body start to shake with fear. He stopped himself immediately. He couldn't show any more signs of weakness, or mess up. He was in deep enough trouble when they got back to the hideout. He opened his mouth to speak, but was interrupted. All Might, Hitoshi heard a voice say. He looked to the shoulder to see the green kid having his arms up and looking hopeful. Don't answer the purple-haired guy with the mask. He's done something to Aizawa. How did the kid figure it out so quickly? Hitoshi supposed it wasn't too hard to figure out, but it felt bad to be read so easily. Additionally, the kid had just created an issue for him to finish the plan. Thank you for the information, young Midoriya. He turned his head back as All Might spoke. The man was surveying the area, probably taking in the situation. Hitoshi shivered as All Might's eyes laid on him. Seems like I have some cleaning up to do. How do you plan on cleaning up? Hitoshi asked, but of course he never received an answer. Thanks, little green dude. All Might started walking towards him. He started to back up. Can't we talk this out? Still no answer. You can't be reasonable, right? No answer. We can resolve this without fighting, can't we? All Might must have picked up speed at some point because Hitoshi blinked when there was a punch coming from him. He didn't have time to move. All he could do was lean out of the way. He could possibly have used a Razorhead, who he learnt was called Aizawa, as a shield, but the force of the punch would knock him out of Hitoshi's control. Aizawa's using his quirk wouldn't help him accomplish his goal. Not that he would have commanded Aizawa in time. All Might was fast. Thankfully, the punch didn't hit him, but the gust of the punch was too strong for him. It blew the mask off his face, then made him land on his bum. His tears started to stream down his face, as even though he tried to keep them at bay, this was it. He was gonna die, or get arrested. Maybe he could finally rest at least, if he was lucky enough. He never stood a chance in this world. Since the day of the house fire, he hadn't relaxed a night since. All Might started to throw another punch at Hitoshi, but he stopped mid-punch. He looked Hitoshi up and down. He lowered his arm slowly. You're a child. Hitoshi didn't say anything at first. He was overwhelmed with emotions and his headache wasn't helping. He glanced behind All Might and saw Shigaraki. He knew he had to take of his advantage somehow. And what of it? Hitoshi said, trying to add attitude to his tone. Well, and just like that, he had a hold of All Might. The All Might. Before he could speak a command, his headache intensified. He had never had a headache this bad, not even when he held 3 people at once. It was like he was holding 6 people, for All Might alone, not even factoring Aizawa. He screamed as he held his head, his vision beginning to blur, and the sound of him was muffled like he was underwater. He could feel something warm dripping from his nose. He was sure it was blood, and it was starting to pour. But he had to continue. He had to keep under control, no matter the cost. Just as his vision almost went blank, he felt Aizawa release from his grasp. The next moment, he felt All Might gone too, his headache only lingering. His tiny lingering headache. His vision and hearing were slowly coming back. His nose had stopped bleeding. He took a moment to gather himself before he looked around. Hitoshi saw red glowing eyes glaring at him. Shigaraki and Kurogiri were stepping through the portal, which closed behind him. He was left. He couldn't believe it. How could they invest so long into him and just leave him? Not that he really wanted to go back, but he was just going to be thrown in jail. That they would probably do worse to him because of his quirk. Hitoshi watched as Aizawa checked on his 2 students who were still in the water. The students seemed happy at first. Then they both looked embarrassed for a moment, like they were being admonished for something. The 2 students nodded, then made their way to the stairs. Aizawa headed to Aizawa and spoke to him. He had no idea what they were talking about, as he couldn't hear the conversation, nor read the lips. While the pro-heroes seemed to be distracted, Hitoshi began to look around, wondering where he could go. Could he get away from here undetected? Where would he go afterwards? Hitoshi was brought away from his thoughts of escaping when he heard footsteps getting closer to him. Aizawa and All Might were coming towards him, his breath caught in his throat as he froze with panic. It was too late to do anything, and his quirk wouldn't help him. Whenever they arrested him, he would sure they'd put a muzzle on him, like foster care, and the League sometimes tended to do. As Hitoshi's body unfroze, it went on autopilot. He lifted his arms to protect his face and head. Then he pulled his knees closer into his chest to protect his stomach. He whimpered unconsciously, tears falling down again. He didn't say anything. He didn't even make a noise. He waited for something to happen, a punch, a kick, or some Rus housing before he was arrested. Nothing ever came, though. The sound of footsteps stopped when he whimpered. It took a whole minute for the footsteps to come back, except this time it was only one step. Hitoshi dared to peek in between his arms. Aizawa was the one coming closer to him. Aizawa stopped a few feet in front of him, squatted down to be on his level. The man started to reach towards him, as if trying to check on Hitoshi, comfort him. Hitoshi flinched hard. He cursed himself internally. He had trained his body to stop these responses because they were disliked by the League, even by some of his foster parents too. Maybe the responses were happening because it was new people. He knew his life was only going to get worse. After what felt like forever, Aizawa spoke. "How old are you?" Hitoshi didn't reply, too scared to speak. He eventually lowered his arms a little, surprised the hero hadn't gotten angry with him yet. Everyone else in his life has resorted to violence quickly. Is this what patience looks like? Still fearful of speaking, Hitoshi signed that he was 15. "Ah, so you're 15. Do you have a name?" Hitoshi's eyes became huge. What were the odds that Aizawa knew sign language? He spelled out his full name in sign language. Shinso Hitoshi. That's an interesting name. Oddly familiar. Hitoshi lowered his head at this. His face turned a light shade of pink. "I can't put my finger on it, though." "Do you know why?" He sighed quietly in relief. Aizawa didn't remember him, or at least not enough right now. Hitoshi shook his head, refusing to willingly give Aizawa the ammo to be disappointed in him. "Why were you here with these villains?" Among other concerning factors, I do remember the question from earlier, "Do you think I want to be here?" Instead of answering, Hitoshi started to fidget. He held back tears and looked to the ground as he started to taking shaky breaths. Aizawa walked him through some breathing exercises to calm down. Once he was calmer, Hitoshi signed that he was sold to the League 5 years ago. He didn't go into further detail. It was too much to sign, and it wouldn't matter anyway. Nothing would change the fact that it happened, nor would it stop it from happening to others. The foster system was already so corrupt and understaffed. The system couldn't be changed so easily. Sirens could be heard into the distance until they stopped outside the building. Aizawa must have seen the panic on Hitoshi's face because he said, "I'll go with you to the police station. I'll explain my concerns to them, and I'm sure they'll want to talk to you." When that didn't seem to ease his worries as much as Aizawa probably wanted, he said, "I'll stay with you, okay? I'll help you as much as I can." Hitoshi nodded, even though he didn't really believe it. Aizawa was the one person he felt he could trust, but so much had happened in his life. He didn't know if he could trust again. He took Aizawa's hand that had been offered again. Aizawa had helped him up, kept a hold of his hand as they walked towards the sirens. His hero was going to help him, or at least try. While this was a dream come true, he hoped it wasn't actually a dream, created by his imagination to escape reality. That is it for this fanfic, Why Me? Though the author has said they may continue this and turn it into a series, I will keep you updated. Are you upset?